The tray slid through the tiny slot in the steel door, landing with a soft clang on the cold, gray floor of the cell. Jeremy felt his stomach knot as he stared at the small portions of food staring back at him, bland, cold, and uninviting. But it wasn't the taste of the food that hit him the hardest, it was the silence. The crushing, suffocating silence of ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America, where even the walls seemed to listen. Jeremy, a man who had once lived fast and free on the streets of Chicago, now found himself trapped in a world where every sound echoed, and every meal was a reminder of his isolation. Today, like every day, he had been taken to the slot for his food, separated from the rest of the world, locked behind steel and concrete. No faces, no voices, just the muffled hum of guards walking the endless corridors. He picked up the tray and sat on the hard bench bolted to the floor, eyeing the mashed potatoes and gray chicken that seemed to mock him with their blandness. But then he noticed something strange. A tiny scrap of paper tucked under the corner of the tray. Someone had left it there intentionally. Jeremy's heart raced. Notes weren't allowed. He carefully unfolded it, his fingers trembling. Written in messy, hurried handwriting were 3 words that made him freeze. "They are watching." Jeremy's eyes darted to the surveillance camera mounted high in the corner. Of course, he was always being watched, but this note suggested something else. Something personal, something dangerous. He swallowed hard, forcing down his panic along with the lukewarm chicken. He tried to push the thought away. Meals were always the same. Chicken, potatoes, maybe a piece of bread. But today the tray held more than food, it held a message. And now, with every bite, Jeremy felt the weight of the eyes that weren't just in the cameras, but in the shadows of the prison itself. Days before, another inmate had whispered about the rules of eating in isolation. Some had gone mad, some had gone silent forever. The food wasn't just food, it was control. Every ingredient, every portion, every delivery through the slot was a reminder that in ADX Florence, even hunger was a weapon. Jeremy remembered the first night he arrived, the sound of the door locking behind him, the echoing click that marked the beginning of total separation. No one to talk to, no one to trust. Guards passed quickly, never staying long enough to hear a word. And then came the food, a cold, calculated routine that reminded him daily of his cage. The next tray came a few hours later, pushed through the same small slot. Jeremy noticed something odd. The chicken had a small black speck on it, almost like a burnt spot. But it moved. He blinked. No, it wasn't moving. Or maybe it was. The paranoia that came from days of silence made him second-guess everything. His mind raced with images of hidden cameras, secret messages, and inmates who vanished without warning. He thought of the stories the prison whispered about. Men who tried to communicate through subtle changes in food placement, who had used the meals as a way to send secret warnings to each other. Some succeeded, most failed. But Jeremy couldn't ignore the note. Someone wanted him to know he wasn't invisible. And someone was playing a dangerous game with his mind. Hours passed. He ate slowly, carefully, feeling every chew like it was part of a ritual he didn't understand. Then came the extreme part, the part that made him gasp and freeze in terror. A guard appeared at the door, not through the slot, but standing there for the first time in his memory, staring at him silently. No words. No greeting. Just eyes that seemed to bore into his soul. Jeremy's heart pounded in his chest. He gripped the edges of the tray, trying to calm himself. The guard didn't move. Just stood there, silent, unblinking. And then, without warning, he leaned forward and whispered, so quietly Jeremy could barely hear, "Don't trust the food." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Jeremy alone with a tray that suddenly felt like a ticking time bomb. Questions swirled in his mind. Was it poison? Was it a message from another inmate? Or was it all in his head, the paranoia of a man trapped inside the most secure prison in the country? Jeremy stared at the tray, his appetite gone, his hands shaking. The note. The speck on the chicken. The guard's whisper. Every meal from now on would be a test, a challenge, a puzzle he had no choice but to solve. And deep down he knew this was only the beginning. Because in ADX Florence, even eating in isolation could be deadly. And Jeremy was about to learn that the food on his tray was just the start of a much darker story. The next morning, Jeremy woke to the dull hum of the fluorescent lights above his cell. His stomach was still uneasy, and the image of the guard whispering, "Don't trust the food," replayed in his mind like a broken record. He didn't move at first, just stared at the gray walls, wondering if it had been real, or if the isolation was already eating at his sanity. When the tray slid through the slot, Jeremy froze. Today the food looked different. The chicken was gray as usual, but there was a tiny packet tucked under the edge of the bread, a folded piece of wax paper, suspiciously thin, almost invisible. His heart raced as he slowly unfolded it. Written in tiny letters were instructions. Mix the potatoes with the juice from the chicken. Watch for movement. Jeremy's stomach churned. Was this a trap? A warning? Or was someone trying to communicate in secret? He knew one thing, he couldn't ignore it. The paranoia from yesterday had him on edge, but curiosity gnawed at him. Carefully he followed the instructions, watching the food with wide eyes. For hours nothing happened. Jeremy stared, barely breathing, waiting for some sign, some reaction. Then the mashed potatoes began to shift. At first he thought he was imagining it. After days of silence, it was easy to see ghosts in his mind. But the movement became undeniable. A small, nearly imperceptible ripple ran through the potatoes, as if something beneath the surface was alive. Jeremy's mind raced. Could someone have hidden a tiny camera inside the food? Or maybe it was something else, a coded warning from an inmate who had been through this before. Fear mingled with fascination. Every nerve in his body screamed to stop, but he couldn't. He had to see it through. Hours turned into a full day of watching the tray, and Jeremy noticed a pattern. Every time he shifted the potatoes, the speck in the chicken moved slightly, as if pointing toward something. Slowly, carefully, he followed the direction it indicated. Beneath the tray, hidden in the corner of the cell floor, was a tiny scrape in the concrete, almost invisible. Jeremy knelt, heart pounding, and reached toward it. His fingers brushed the rough surface, and he found a small, folded note wedged inside. With trembling hands he opened it. The message was short, almost chilling. Trust no one. The next meal decides your fate. That night the tray arrived again. Jeremy's hands shook as he lifted it through the slot. The food looked the same, bland, unassuming, harmless, but he knew better. He remembered the note, the speck, the movement. He realized that someone inside ADX Florence was orchestrating this. A silent game, testing him, seeing how far his curiosity would go. As he stared at the tray, Jeremy noticed something terrifying. A tiny, almost invisible hole had been drilled into the corner of the chicken. It was so small, so precise, that only someone with careful planning could have done it. Panic surged through him. Was it poison? A recording device? Or something even worse? Suddenly the lights flickered. The low hum of the prison shifted to an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant clanging of doors and the echo of footsteps. Jeremy froze, heart hammering. Then a shadow moved across the cell, a figure standing at the corner where no guard should have been. The figure spoke, voice low and urgent, "Eat. Or regret it." Jeremy's hands shook as he realized the game had reached its peak. The food wasn't just food anymore, it was a test, a trap, a message from the unseen forces that controlled life in ADX Florence. Every bite, every swallow could determine his next hour, his next day, or even his survival. He took a deep breath and picked up the fork. The first bite was careful, almost ceremonial. The second faster. His eyes never left the shadow, his mind racing with every story he'd heard about inmates who vanished, swallowed by the silence of the prison. Then it happened. The extreme moment that would mark Jeremy forever. The tray shifted violently, as if something under it had moved with sudden force. The shadow lunged just for a second, and then vanished into the darkness. Jeremy stumbled back, his heart in his throat. The food lay on the tray, harmless looking, but he knew the danger was real, and it had been closer than he could have imagined. By the next morning, Jeremy realized he had survived, but he wasn't the same. Every meal, every tray, every bite carried a weight of fear and caution he could never shake. ADX Florence had shown him its cruelest secret. Isolation wasn't just about being alone, it was about being watched, tested, and tormented in ways that preyed on the mind as much as the body. And from that day on, every time a tray slid through the slot, Jeremy knew one truth. In this place, even eating was a battle for survival.